Hello again, everybody. This is Craig Evans, and thank you for watching this installment of the Autism Hangout feature program series, Key Learnings of Autism Thought Leaders. Today's guest is paving the way for teachers and educators to improve the assessment and intervention skills of teachers everywhere. And he's literally written the book on the subject. The book is called A Best Practice Guide to Assessment and Intervention for Autism and Asperger Syndrome in Schools. Jessica Kingsley is the publisher. So Autism Hangout, please welcome author, teacher, researcher, and autism expert, Dr. Lee Wilkinson. Welcome, Dr. Lee. It's nice to have you here.
Thanks, Craig. Nice to see you.
Well, it's really timely that you've written this book at this day and age, because just yesterday off of Google, I picked up this article out of London, and it says autistic pupils are unfairly excluded from school, according to a certain study. Now, granted, it's out of London at this point, and it's a small group, but they are claiming that 30% of bad behaviors could be underdiagnosed kids on the spectrum. Mm-hmm. Has that pretty much been your findings as well?
I would agree with that. Research tells us that kids on the spectrum, especially the upper end, are underidentified.
Okay. Well, tell us about your book, because that's what your book is all about.
Okay. My goal in writing the book was really twofold. Mm-hmm. One is to provide a best practice guide to early identification. And secondly, to sensitize school officials, teachers, school professionals about autism, and that even kids who have mild autism, or on the upper end of the spectrum, can be compromised as far as their social skills.
Mm-hmm. One of the things you talk about in your book is the importance of looking at the dimension of the child rather than just the categorization of something like autism. Could you talk about that for a few moments?
Yes. We as individuals and human beings love to categorize.
Mm-hmm.
I think there's a tendency to do that in psychology, particularly, and psychiatry. But I think if we view autism from a dimensional perspective, we get a better view. Lorna Wing said that aspects of Asperger syndrome, or indeed the autism spectrum, are present in all of us to some degree. Mm-hmm. I think if we view it that way, we get a better understanding of autism, and certainly kids in school, the way they interact socially.
Mm-hmm. Dr. Lee, I know you wrote this book largely from your research and your personal experience. Was there any basic premise that you used going into it?
My major premise in writing the book was that autistic traits are normally distributed in the general population, and that, of course, means the school population, and we all need to note that.
Yeah, so it gets back to just plain be aware. Be aware.
Exactly right.
In going through your book, another thing I've noticed is you for sure are a scientist and you are a researcher, because you've backed up so many of the things that you're talking about as far as suggestions on good solid research. And you're also very methodical in putting in points for people to follow and how best to proceed.
Yes, I really want to make it a best practice guide. Mm-hmm. In fact, I'd like to make best practice common practice, and that's a good part of writing the book also. Mm-hmm. And to back it up with good, solid research. Unfortunately, autism is a field that is prone to a great deal of myth, inaccuracies. So I wanted to, regardless of my personal feelings about it, is to really analyze the literature and translate that into best practice.
Can you talk about a few of these best practices? Can you give us some idea of the content of the book?
Yes. The one thing I wanted to do, I'm very proud of, is that I have an index of 50 best practices. And these best practices relate to the major areas of assessment, treatment, and more importantly, educational planning. So when you look at the book, you can go to the index. You can take a look at the various sections, and it'll show you what the best practice is, and you can go look it up, and you can read the information and for a wider view.
Mm-hmm. And all of this is based on research. It's also based on what, 20-some years of your experience?
Yes, but on both, and but it does reflect the most current research in the field. Excellent. And when I say best practice, I mean the empirically based literature, not just someone's opinion.
And one of the things that you've brought out too that I think needs to be told over and over again is it's not just about academic performance, that it indeed is more about social, emotional well-being.
Yes, good point. I think, and rightfully so, we spend a great deal of time talking about academics in our schools, reading, writing, and arithmetic. However, I think very often we ignore the social communication piece and how important that is to learning and to ultimately to being able to function appropriately in society and successfully. So I think we need to spend more time on that social part as well as the academics.
Mm-hmm. By the way, a very large percentage of the membership at Autism Hangout is teachers and educators. And if you were to give them 1 or 2 or 3 key pieces of advice about how best to assess and intervene, what might those be?
As far as assessment, I think being aware of we call them red flags, but some of the indicators of autism. I'm not just referring to classic or Tanner's autism, but to kids on the spectrum on the higher end. And the majority of kids with autism are identified in school setting. So we all need to be aware of that. That would be one. Secondly, I think as far as interventions are concerned, there are many things we could do at school, and I think most of them revolve around the social skills part of either training or instruction in the classroom.
All right, I have to compliment you here. You were not a capitalist, because the first thing you did is make comments as a teacher and as an educator. The capitalist would have said the first thing you need to do is buy my book. But I do want to put this book out there because as an educator myself, I don't deal with as many kids on the spectrum as most people in an elementary setting. But the way that you have approached this, the methodical approach, it's a must-have for teachers and educators. So where is this book available now? Where can people go to pick it up?
Well, as you said, it's published by Jessica Kingsley Publishers. It's available on all the major booksellers, Amazon.com, Barnes & Noble, Books A Million, so forth and so on. Because Jessica Kingsley is international, it's available worldwide. Thank you.
Another thing that I would like to include here is that you are a regular blogger on Autism Hangout, and for those members of Autism Hangout that have read your blogs, they already see the value in the content that you contribute. So I thank you for doing that. And folks, if you haven't read some of his blogs, please stop by the blog on Autism Hangout and take a look at what Dr. Lee has left for us. Dr. Lee, is there any more advice that you'd like to give teachers and educators?
I think it's just a general advice. It's Autism Awareness Month.
Yes.
And I think awareness, and there's many ways to be aware, of course. Thinking about it, just being alert to it. And I think if you're an educator, to think about your kids. Think about the prevalence. It's quite high.
Okay. If people are looking for more information on you, is there a web address they can go to?
Yes, they can go to bestpracticeautism.com.
Excellent. Dr. Lee, thank you for being a part of this today. Thank you for your book and your contributions to all of us that are trying to help maximize our kids' potential.
Thank you, Craig. I appreciate you taking the time.
And thank you, Autism Hangout. I'll be back again soon with another installment in Key Learnings of Autism Thought Leaders.